That's a cloak trim. That's a cloak trim. That's a cloak trim made in the shape of a little box. That's cloak trim. That's cloak trim. That's cloak trim. Everything around this door is cloak trim. If you've got like huge gaps that you need to fill, too big for filler, too big for caulk, not quite the kind of gaps that you would use like skirting boards and things like that, well, the thing that you might be looking for is cloaking trims, and cloaking trims are amazing. Trims fix everything. Hiya folks, and welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about cloaking trims. I'm sure they go by lots of other names, but they're basically plastic trims that are really good for covering up big gaps. They get used really commonly with double glazing, but you can use them in all sorts of scenarios, and they come in all sorts of different sizes. So for example, here we've got this huge gap around this window here that's filled with foam. We'll cover that with a trim, probably all the way around, and then we'll caulk it in and it'll look awesome. And if you're wondering what the end result looks like, well, those are cloak trims. That's a cloak trim. That looks like two cloak trims on top of each other. And that is a thing that you can do if your gap is too big for a single cloak trim. You would never know, glancing at it, that that's two cloak trims on top of each other. It actually looks quite good. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. Look, all of this is made of cloak trims. I've already actually fitted a few around the edge of the bath here because we need a removable trim so that you can get the bath panel easily off. So I've just used a cloak trim at this edge, and ultimately there'll be one on top of the bath here just to cover up that little kind of gap that we've got at the end there, but we need to do the shower panels and all that sort of thing first. But essentially this is what we're dealing with. So these are cloak trims, or cloak profiles they sometimes get called as well, beads, window beading, there's loads of different names for it. I picked these up from Wix, so you can work out what you're kind of searching for. As I say, cloak profile, uPVC or PVCU. This is a 65mm and this comes in 2.5 meter lengths. You can buy them in packs or individually. Here's another one here. This is, oh, it doesn't actually tell you. I think that's a 95mm one off the top of my head. And also don't forget these come with a protective kind of film over them. Generally, I get rid of the film as soon as I'm ready to fit it. I don't leave it on until the last minute, because normally you're going to caulk these in and you don't want to be caulking over the top of the film, so you need to get the film out the road once they are fitted, unless you're not planning on caulking it in. You don't have to caulk them in. As is often the case on this channel, I filmed all of that a little while ago, and I've actually got a video coming up very, very soon about different caulks and silicons and sealers and all that sort of thing. And I'm also going to cover why that type of silicon is different to that type of silicon, which is the sort of silicon you're more likely to use with cloak trims. But there's no real hard and fast rules, so it depends on the circumstances. So if you want to see that video all about different caulks, make sure you hit subscribe. But in the meantime, let's head back over to our cloaking trims. The other really nice thing about these, they're kind of made of a foam type material. So if you look down the edge of it, if the camera focuses, it's like a foamy stuff with a PVC kind of laminate over the top. The PVC is probably like 0.5 millimeter thick or something like that. It can be a little bit on the brittle side, so you do have to be a little bit careful with them. But they're so easy to work with, they're just fantastic. You can cut them with a chop saw or with a hand saw, like a fine-toothed hand saw will cut them absolutely no problem. You can score them with a Stanley knife if you're careful and just snap it to the correct length. Bit of a gamble that, because you can get rough edges on, but if you're in a rush you can do that. My preferred method to get a nice really clean cut on them is to use the chop saw. So the first place that I'm going to be fitting one, if you remember when I sorted the floor out around this patio or like sliding doors in the living room, we've got kind of a gap at the front here, like here, that needs to be dealt with. So what I'm going to do is just pop a cloak trim down there to cover that up. So obviously whatever you're attaching onto needs to be nice and clean, not covered in dust. and make sure your cloak trim isn't covered in dust either. There we go, easy as that. I'm just using the usual Everbuilds instant nails. Love this stuff, cheapest chips, seems to work really well. You can also use CA glue or super glue with activator. You can use double-sided tape. You can use all sorts. It's so lightweight, it's so easy to attach. And then in terms of finishing, where it's really up to you, what I'm going to do here, the general rule of thumb is, if you're going to be painting it, do not use silicone. Always use cork, because you can't paint over the top of silicone. So what I'm going to be doing here is a little bit of a bead of cork up this edge, but because you'll never ever be painting this because it's already white and it's PVC, I'll do a very thin bead of silicone across the top there just to tidy that edge up. Bearing in mind that you're creating a future job for yourself if you do use silicone, because eventually that silicone's probably going to go a little bit discoloured or it'll get damaged or whatever, so you don't have to put anything at the top, but I think just to remove that very, very faint shadow line that I've got across the top there, I'll put a micro bead of silicone. And as I say, anywhere where we're coming into contact with things that are going to get painted, we'll get cork. And yes, I could also silicone this bottom edge if I wanted to prevent any moisture from getting under there. Personally, I don't think it needs it. I don't think we're not in a room where that's going to get particularly wet, and it shouldn't cause a problem. But yeah, that's optional as well. That's the kind of quality of cut you should be getting on a chop saw, by the way. It should be absolutely perfect. A couple of tips if you're not getting a nice clean cut like that. You're probably either trying to cut it too quickly. It could also be that you're not letting the blade get fully up to speed. It needs to be cutting at full speed and not when the blade is slowing down or speeding up. And it could also be that your blade is either too coarse or not sharp enough. I'm using a high tooth count Freud blade, but to be fair, the blade's seen better days. The teeth are pretty worn on it and I'm still getting a cut like that. Just don't force it, let the saw do the work. You're not going to get as clean a cut as that using a Stanley knife or a hand saw, by the way. It's only a chop saw that's really going to give you that kind of perfect finish. Oh, and by the way, because these cloak trims take CA glue really well, you can create nice little miters like this. Just a bit of CA glue and activator, cut both on a 45, glue it together, and then assemble your joint as if you were doing a skirting board, and you can get a nice tidy miter that way. And by the way, you don't have to use plastic trims everywhere. Plastic has its place. It's great because you don't have to paint it, but it's not particularly hard wearing. And if you want to do anything that involves fillering around your trim and you're going to have to sand down maybe screw holes or anything like that, you're probably best not using plastic trims in that situation. You're probably best using wooden trims of some description. So for example, this is perfect for in this little cupboard, just to act as like a mini kind of skirting board. Once that's all corked in and painted up, it's a much neater finish than just having plaster straight down to the carpet. Similar story in this cupboard here. As you can see, there's never been any kind of trim at the bottom here, just plaster down the carpet again. But what I'll be doing is boxing in this little area of electrics and cables, and then I'll put a little trim around the side here, just to give a nice clean boundary between the walls and the flooring. Talking of flooring, around the laminate flooring downstairs, I'm going to be using these pre-primed wooden kind of, what would you call them? It's like a cornice trim of some description. These are 18 by 18 millimeters, 2.4 meters long, and I'm going to be pre-glossing them, and then it saves having to try and cut in around the flooring. And by the way, you don't need to overthink getting your profiles exactly correct and stuff like that. For example, here, someone at some point has boxed in this area here. It was for pipe work, and they've just used a completely different type of skirting at the bottom here, different height and everything compared to this. We do have like this gap at the bottom to deal with. I will be sorting that out because you might see it even once the carpet's fitted. But I bet in a million years, when you've seen this room over the course of this renovation, you've never noticed that that's a different profile over that boxing. In fact, if anything, it looks like it's always been like that. But yeah, for folks like me who can't necessarily cut things perfectly all the time, trims are like the ultimate lifesaver. They can cover up all sorts of mistakes. They can make what was previously quite a bodgy job look really, really professional. They're very, very easy to work with, very easy to cut, very easy to glue. Don't need to bother painting the plastic ones. It's genuinely the ultimate problem solver. You can use it for so many different things. And as I say, you don't just have to use cloak trim. DIY stores sell all sorts of different trim profiles in wood, in metal, in plastics. So just find a trim that works to solve the problem that you've encountered. Folks, as per usual, any tips, suggestions, anything else you want to add to this, pop them down in the comments. For now, folks, look after one another. Be nice to each other. We shall see you next time. Tatty bye.